The letter arrived in a plain envelope, but it burned in my hands like a live grenade. I stood frozen in my cramped Kansas City apartment, the words on the page blurring as my pulse hammered. Investigation into your conduct under Article 125. Captain Ethan Caldwell, my best friend since we were kids stealing firecrackers from Old Man Grayson's store, was facing a dishonorable discharge for being gay. I didn't think twice. I drove 200 miles to Fort Riley that same night. The base sprawled across the Kansas plains, a maze of concrete and chain link under a bruised purple sky. Ethan met me at the gate, his uniform crisp, but his face a wreck, dark circles under his hazel eyes. His usual cocky grin replaced by a tight, desperate line. "Leo," he whispered, pulling me into a hug that felt like he was drowning and I was the only thing keeping him afloat. "They're gonna ruin me." We sat in his barracks room, the air thick with the smell of gun oil and cheap coffee. Ethan's hands shook as he explained, a jealous ex, a leaked photo, and a commanding officer who cared more about regulations than fairness. The military's "don't ask, don't tell" repeal was still fresh in 2025, but old prejudices lingered like smoke. If Ethan couldn't prove he was in a committed relationship, something stable, something Aperved, he'd lose everything. His career, his pension, his pride. "I told them I'm married," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "To a guy? To you." My heart stopped. "Me?" I choked out, half laughing, half panicking. We'd been inseparable since we were 10. Sure, shared secrets, late-night drives, even a drunken kiss once that we never talked about again. But married? I was just a barista with a beat-up Honda and a dream of opening my own coffee shop. I wasn't anyone's husband, let alone Ethan's. "They'll check," he said, eyes pleading. "They'll want proof, photos, stories, you name it. If you say no, I'm done." He leaned closer, his voice cracking. "Leo, you're the only one I trust." I should have said no. I should have walked away, kept my life simple. But those hazel eyes, the ones that always saw through my bullshit, pinned me in place. I thought of every time he'd had my back when my dad kicked me out at 17, when I flunked out of community college, when I cried over my first heartbreak. Ethan was my anchor, and now he was sinking. "All right," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll be your husband." The next week was a crash course in deception. We staged photos, me and Ethan at a diner, laughing over greasy burgers, him teaching me to shoot at the range, his hands steadying mine, us on a fake anniversary trip to the Ozarks, his arms slung around my shoulders. Each click of the camera felt like a lie, but the warmth of his touch lingered too long, blurring the edges of what was real. Our story needed to hold up under scrutiny, so we memorized details. Our wedding was a quiet courthouse affair in St. Louis, just us and a witness. I wore a navy suit. He wore his dress blues. We picked out fake rings at a pawn shop, cheap bands that glinted too brightly under the fluorescent lights. Every night, we drilled each other on our habits. Ethan's obsession with black coffee, my hatred of mornings, the way we'd fight over who controlled the thermostat. But the more we built this fake life, the more it felt real. I'd catch Ethan staring at me across the mess hall, his lips twitching like he wanted to say something but couldn't. I'd find myself noticing the way his jaw flexed when he was stressed, or how his laugh filled the empty spaces in my chest. I told myself it was just the act, just the pressure of keeping his career alive. But late at night, lying on the cot in his barracks while he slept on the floor, I'd listen to his steady breathing and wonder what it'd be like if this wasn't a lie. The first test came sooner than we expected. Colonel Hargrove, a grizzled man with a voice like gravel, summoned us to his office. "Captain Caldwell," he said, eyeing us like we were suspects in a lineup. "You claim you're married. Prove it." Ethan didn't flinch. He slid a photo across the deskus at the lake, my head on his shoulder, the sunset painting us in gold. "This is Leo," he said, his voice steady. "My husband." Hargrove's eyes flicked to me, sharp and skeptical. "And you, Mr. Navarro, you're willing to stake your reputation on this?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Ethan's hand brushed mine under the table. A silent please. "Yes, sir," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm all in." Hargrove leaned back, unconvinced but out of ammunition for now. "We'll be watching," he warned. "One misstep, Caldwell, and you're out." As we left the office, Ethan's hand lingered on my back, warm through my jacket. "You were perfect," he murmured, and my heart did something dangerous, something I couldn't name. We were in too deep now, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find my way out. The lie grew heavier with every day, like a rucksack packed with stones. Ethan and I were now a unit, a performance that had to be flawless. At Fort Riley, soldiers whispered behind our backs, their eyes tracking us in the mess hall, the gym, the training fields. I wasn't just Leo Navarro anymore. I was Captain Caldwell's husband, a role that came with scrutiny and expectations I hadn't anticipated. We moved into Ethan's on-base housing to sell the story. It was a small, beige box of a house, with creaky floors and thin walls that carried every sound. I'd lie awake at night, listening to Ethan shift on the couch he insisted on taking so I could have the bed. "You're doing me a favor," he'd said, flashing that half-smile that made my stomach flip. "Least I can do is give you the good mattress." But I'd hear him tossing, restless, and wonder if he was as tangled up in this as I was. Our days fell into a rhythm. I'd drive into town for my shifts at the coffee shop, dodging questions from coworkers about why I'd moved to the base. Ethan would train, led his platoon, and come home with stories of drills and near misses with suspicious officers. We'd cook dinner together badly, because neither of us was any good at it, and laugh over burnt tacos or lumpy mashed potatoes. It was domestic, almost too easy, like we'd been doing this forever. But the cracks started showing. One night, after a long day of dodging Hargrove's spies, Ethan cracked open a beer and sank onto the couch beside me, closer than usual. "You ever think about what happens if this doesn't work?" he asked, his voice low, like he was afraid of the answer. I stared at the TV, some mindless action movie flickering across the screen. "We make it work," I said, trying to sound confident. "We've got the photos, the rings, the whole story." He shook his head, his knee brushing mine. "Not that. I mean, what happens to us after?" The question hung there, heavy and unspoken. I wanted to ask what he meant by us, but my throat closed up. Instead, I nudged his shoulder, forcing a grin. "You trying to get rid of me already, Caldwell?" He laughed, but it was hollow. "Never," he said, and his eyes held mine for a beat too long, stirring something I wasn't ready to face. The next day, we got careless. We were at the base's annual family picnic, a sprawling event with banners, burgers, and kids running wild. Ethan and I played our parts holding hands, sharing a plate, laughing at some private joke we'd rehearsed. But then, under an oak tree, away from the crowd, Ethan grabbed my hand for real, his grip tight and urgent. "Leo," he whispered, his voice rough, "I don't know how to thank you for this." Before I could respond, a shadow fell over us. Sergeant Ruiz, one of Ethan's platoon mates, stood there, his eyes narrowed. "Didn't know you two were so cozy," he said, his tone dripping with suspicion. "Thought this was just a marriage of convenience." Ethan's hand tightened on mine, but his voice was steady. "You got a problem, Ruiz." Ruiz smirked, backing off, but not before muttering, "Better watch your step, Captain." That night, Ethan paced the living room, his jaw tight. "He's gonna talk," he said. If he reports us, Hargrove will dig deeper. We need to be airtight. So we doubled down. We staged more photos, posted them on social media with captions about our happy life. I started staying over every night, not just weekends, because married couples didn't commute. We even practiced casual touches, his hand on my lower back, my arm around his waist so it looked natural. But every brush of his skin against mine sent my heart racing, and I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. The lie was working, but it was unraveling me. I'd catch myself wanting to reach for him when no one was watching, wanting to know if that drunken kiss years ago meant as much to him as it did to me. I told myself it was just the act, just the stress of playing house. But deep down, I knew better. By the end of the month, Hargrove called us in again. This time, he had to file photos, social media posts, even a copy of our marriage certificate we'd forged with a friend's help. You've been busy, he said, his voice cold. But I'm not convinced. I want you both at the officers' gala next week. If you're really married, you'll act like it. As we left, Ethan's hand found mine, squeezing hard. We can do this, he said, but his voice shook. I nodded, but inside, I was terrified not of Hargrove, but of how much I wanted this to be real. The officers' gala was a glittering trap, a room full of uniforms and judgment. Ethan and I stepped into the ballroom, his hand warm against my back, guiding me through a sea of officers and their spouses. I felt like an imposter in my rented suit, the tie choking me as I smiled at strangers. Ethan, though, was in his element. Captain Caldwell, all charm and steel, shaking hands and deflecting questions with ease. But I saw the strain in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened when Colonel Hargrove's gaze lingered on us. Stay close, Ethan murmured, his breath tickling my ear. They're watching every move. We danced because of course we had to sell the story. Ethan led, his hand firm on my waist, and I tried to focus on the steps instead of how his touch made my pulse race. The band played a slow jazz number, and for a moment, it was just us, swaying under the chandeliers. You're doing great, he whispered, his lips brushing my temple. I didn't know if it was part of the act or something more, but I leaned into him, letting myself pretend it was real. The night wore on, and we navigated conversations with officers' wives who asked about our wedding and colleagues who probed for cracks in our story. I told the rehearsed lies: how we met as kids, how Ethan proposed on a whim, how we were saving for a house. Each word felt heavier, like I was building a life I'd never have. Then came the speech. Hargrove took the stage, his voice booming about duty and honor. His eyes locked on Ethan as he said, "Some of you think you can bend the rules, hide behind lies. We'll find the truth." It wasn't just a speech, it was a warning. Afterward, Ethan pulled me outside to the courtyard, away from the crowd. The night air was cool, the stars sharp above us. "He's not letting this go," Ethan said, his voice low. "He's got someone tailing us. I'm sure of it." I grabbed his arm, my frustration boiling over. "Then let's give him nothing to find. We're good at this, Ethan. Too good." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Are we?" he asked, and there was something raw in his voice, something that made my chest ache. "Leo, this isn't just about my career anymore." He stopped, but the unspoken words hung between us. I wanted to push, to ask what he meant, but footsteps crunched on the gravel behind us. Ruiz again, his smirk cutting through the dark. "Nice show," he said, "but I'm not buying it." Ethan stepped in front of me, his posture all soldier. "Back off, Ruiz." Ruiz laughed, walking away, but the damage was done. We couldn't afford slip-ups. Not now. Back inside, we doubled our efforts: more touches, more smiles, more stories. But every time Ethan's hand brushed mine, I felt the lie fraying, replaced by something I couldn't control. The next week was a blur of paranoia. We caught glimpses of Ruiz whispering to other soldiers. Saw Hargrove's aide taking notes when we passed. Ethan started sleeping less, his temper short. One night, after a tense dinner where we barely spoke, he grabbed my wrist as I headed for the bedroom. "Leo," he said, his voice rough. "I need to know you're still in this." I looked at him, his face inches from mine, and my heart pounded. "I'm here," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." But I was lying to myself now, too. I wasn't just here for him anymore. I was here because I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. The rain came down in sheets, turning Fort Riley into a muddy, miserable mess. Ethan came home late, his uniform soaked, his face like stone. Ruiz filed a report, he said, tossing his cap onto the table. "He's saying we're faking it. Hargrove's calling us in tomorrow." My stomach dropped. We'd been so careful, but Ruiz's suspicions were a ticking bomb. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Ethan didn't answer right away. He paced the small living room, his boots leaving wet tracks on the floor. "We stick to the story," he said finally. "But we need more. Something undeniable." That's when he suggested the impossible, a public proposal. "We say we're renewing our vows," he explained, his eyes bright with desperation. "A big gesture. Something no one can question. We'll do it at the base's community center. Invite everyone." I stared at him, my heart racing. "Ethan, that's insane. We're already lying through our teeth. This is too much." He grabbed my shoulders, his grip firm but not painful. "Leo, I'm out of options. If we don't sell this, I'm done. And you." He trailed off, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't read. "I can't lose you, too." The words hit me like a punch. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the look in his eyes stopped me. Instead, I nodded. "Okay, let's do it." The next day, we planned the proposal. We picked a spot in the community center's garden, strung up fairy lights, and spread the word. By evening, half the base was buzzing about Captain Caldwell's big romantic gesture. I felt sick, but Ethan was all in, his soldier's resolve kicking in. He even got down on one knee in front of everyone, holding up a new Ringa simple silver band that caught the light. "Leo Navarro," he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Will you marry me again?" The crowd cheered, but I could barely hear them over the pounding in my chest. I said yes, of course, and he slid the ring onto my finger, his hand shaking. When he stood, he pulled me into a kiss, our first real one since that drunken night years ago. It was quick, staged for the audience, but it lit something inside me I couldn't put out. Hargrove was there, watching from the back, his arms crossed. Ruiz was there too, his smirk gone, replaced by a scowl. The plan worked, people believed us. But as we stood there, hands clasped, smiling for the crowd, I felt the lie unraveling in a different way. I wasn't pretending anymore. That night, back at the house, Ethan was quiet, staring at the ring on my finger like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You didn't have to kiss me back," he said finally, his voice low. "I know this is a lot." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "What if I wanted to?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He froze, his eyes locking on mine. For a moment, I thought he'd say something, bridge the gap between us. But then he turned away, muttering, "We can't mess this up, Leo. Not now." The rejection stung, but I didn't push. We had a meeting with Hargrove in the morning, and we needed to be perfect. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time, not just for Ethan's career, but for whatever was growing between us. Hargrove's office was a battlefield of its own. all sharp edges and cold light. Ethan and I sat across from him, our hands linked under the table, a silent lifeline. The colonel flipped through our file, his expression unreadable. "You've put on quite a show," he said, his voice like a blade. "But I'm not here for theater." He slid a photo across the desk, us at the proposal. Ethan on one knee, me with that stupid, stunned smile. "Convincing," Hargrove said. "But I've got statements. Soldiers saying you two barely knew each other a year ago. No record of cohabitation until recently. Explain." Ethan didn't flinch. "We kept it private," he said, his voice steady. "Leo's not military. We didn't want our relationship under a microscope." Hargrove's eyes flicked to me. "And you, Navarro? You're telling me you've been married to a soldier for years and never set foot on this base until now?" My mouth went dry, but Ethan's grip tightened, grounding me. "I'm not big on crowds," I said, forcing a laugh. "But I love him. Always have." The words felt too real, and Ethan's thumb brushed over my knuckles. A small, secret gesture. Hargrove leaned back, unconvinced but lacking proof. "I'm assigning you a chaperone," he said. "Lieutenant Carter. She'll be watching you, living with you, until I'm satisfied. One slip, and you're out. Caldwell." The chaperone was a nightmare. Lieutenant Carter was sharp-eyed and relentless, moving into our house like a hawk. She followed us everywhere: breakfast, training, even our date nights. Every touch, every glance, had to be calculated. Ethan and I were actors in a play that never ended, and the strain was breaking us. One night, after Carter went to bed, Ethan pulled me into the kitchen, his voice low. "This isn't working," he said. "She's too close. She's going to catch something." I grabbed his arm, desperate. "Then we get better. We don't give her anything to report." He looked at me, his eyes dark with something I couldn't name. "Leo, I'm dragging you down with me. You didn't sign up for this." "I signed up for you," I snapped, my voice louder than I meant. Carter's door creaked upstairs, and we froze, listening until it was quiet again. I lowered my voice. "I'm not leaving you to face this alone." Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he'd argue. Instead, he pulled me into a hug, his arms tight around me. "I don't deserve you," he whispered, and my heart broke open. The next day, Carter caught us off guard. She cornered me in the backyard while Ethan was at drills, her notepad out. "You're not military," she said. "Why put yourself through this? What's in it for you?" I froze, my mind racing. "I love him," I said, the words coming too easily. "That's enough." She studied me, her pen hovering. "We'll see," she said, and walked away. That night, Ethan came home exhausted, his shoulders slumped. "Carter's reporting to Hargrove tomorrow," he said. "If she's got anything, we're done." I wanted to tell him it would be okay, that we'd make it through. But the truth was, I didn't know. All I knew was that I'd fallen for him hard, real, and irreversible. And if we lost this fight, I'd lose more than just the lie. Carter's report was a guillotine, and we were waiting for the blade to fall. She'd been in our house for a week, her eyes like cameras, catching every hesitation, every moment we forgot to play the part. Ethan was unraveling, his usual confidence replaced by a restless edge. I wasn't much better. Every fake smile, every stage touch, felt like a betrayal of the real feelings I couldn't shake. That evening, Ethan grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the house. "I need air," he said, his voice tight. We walked down the quiet street, the base's lights fading behind us. Under a street lamp, he stopped, turning to face me. "Leo," he said, his voice breaking, "I can't keep doing this to you." I frowned, my heart pounding. What are you talking about? We're almost there. Hargrove's running out of reasons to doubt us. He shook his head, his eyes glistening. It's not about Hargrove. It's about you. You're giving up your life for mayor job, your freedom, everything. And he swallowed hard. I'm falling for you, Leo. For real. And it's killing me because this was supposed to be fake. The world stopped. I stared at him, my breath caught in my throat. Ethan, I whispered, but he kept going. I can't keep pretending I don't feel this, he said, stepping closer. But if I tell you the truth, and we mess this up, I'll lose you and my career. I can't. I didn't let him finish. I grabbed his face and kissed him, hard and desperate, pouring everything I'd held back into it. He froze for a second, then kissed me back, his hands gripping my jacket like he was afraid I'd disappear. When we pulled apart, we were both shaking, the street lamp casting our shadows long and tangled. We're in this together, I said, my voice hoarse. No matter what. But the moment didn't last. Carter's car pulled up, her headlights cutting through the dusk. She stepped out, her expression unreadable. Interesting timing, she said, her voice cold. Hargrove wants you both in his office. Now. The drive to the base was silent, Ethan's hand gripping mine in the dark. Hargrove was waiting, his desk littered with photosis kissing under the street lamp, caught by some hidden camera. Care to explain? He asked, his tone icy. Ethan didn't hesitate. That's my husband, he said, his voice steady. And I love him. If that's a problem, discharge me. But you won't break us. My heart swelled, but Hargrove wasn't done. You've got one last chance, he said. A formal review board tomorrow. Bring everything proof. Witnesses. Whatever you've got. Or you're finished. We left the office, the weight of the ultimatum crushing us. Back home, we sat on the couch, too wired to sleep. I meant it, Ethan said quietly, his hand finding mine. I love you, Leo. I think I always have. I squeezed his hand, my chest tight. I love you too, I said, the words freeing and terrifying. But we've got one day to save you. Let's make it count. The review board was our last stand. The room was stark. A long table with 5 officers staring us down. Hargrove at the center. Ethan stood tall in his dress blues, his hand brushing mine for courage. I wore my best suit, the silver ring on my finger glinting under the fluorescent lights. We'd spent the night preparing gathering photos, letters from friends who'd sworn to back our story, even a video from our vow renewal that we'd edited to look older. Hargrove started with a barrage of questions, dates, locations, intimate details only a real couple would know. We answered in sync, our story airtight. Ethan's voice never wavered, even when Hargrove pressed about the street lamp kiss. That was real, Ethan said, his eyes meeting mine. Every moment with Leo is real. I felt the room shift, the other officers exchanging glances. Then came our witnesses, our friend Maria, who'd officiated our fake wedding, and a soldier from Ethan's platoon who'd seen us together at the picnic. Their words painted a picture of love, commitment, and sacrifice. Even Carter, to our shock, spoke up. I've lived with them, she said. They're the real deal. Hargrove's face didn't soften, but he had no ammunition left. After hours of grilling, he dismissed us, promising a decision by morning. We walked out, exhausted but hopeful, Ethan's arm around my shoulders. We did it, he whispered, and I leaned into him, believing it for the first time. The next day, the verdict came. Ethan's record was clear. No discharge, no penalties. Hargrove didn't look happy, but he couldn't fight the evidence. We stood in the courtyard, the sun warm on our faces, as soldiers and friends congratulated us. Ruiz slunk away, his accusations dead. But the real victory wasn't Ethan's career, it was us. That night, back at the house, we sat on the porch, the stars bright above. "I don't want this to end," Ethan said, his voice soft. "I want you, Leo. For real." I laughed, tears in my eyes. "You've got me," I said, and kissed him, slow and sure. No cameras, no lies. We'd started this to save him, but we'd saved each other. Months later, we were still together, no longer pretending. I moved to the base permanently, working on my coffee shop dream while Ethan climbed the ranks. The rings we wore weren't props anymore, they were promises. And every time I looked at him, I knew I'd lose my heart all over again, and I'd never want it back.